The year is 1971 and a Chinese family is preparing to board a plane and go to Siberia. One of the sons of the family, who carried the nickname Tiger, is busy hatching a plan though. Knowing how paranoid the great Chairman Mao had become of his father, he hatched a plan, Operation 571. The evidence is scant, but a later co-conspirator revealed details of the plan. It involved flamethrowers, bazookas, bombs, all with one goal: boarding Mao Zedong's train and shooting him dead. But as the plane departed and flew over Mongolia, all tracks on the flight were lost. The following day, a Chinese ambassador in Ulaanbaatar was called to be told a Chinese plane had crashed in Mongolia after illegally entering its airspace. With Mongolia being closely allied with the Soviet Union and therefore heavily anti-China, the ambassador had to go to the post office to send a cable to Beijing. The cable was clear. In the wreckage was found 7 pistols, 2 assault rifles, a copy of Mao's Red Book, and 9 dead bodies. One of which was Lin Biao.
Hello there.
Okay, so in our third episode of Characters of Communist China, we're covering the life of Lin Biao. And by the end of this video, let me know, do you think Lin's death was a coincidence, or did Mao order his plane to be shot down? Don't forget to leave a like on this video to tell YouTube that Lin Biao is a historical figure that really deserves more coverage. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on Lin's early life, however I will talk about his personal life much more than any other figure because it really is quite fascinating. Basically, he trained at Chiang Kai-shek's Whampoa Military Academy, and this was when the Communist Party and the Kuomintang formed a united front against the warlords. However, once Chiang Kai-shek conquered the warlords and then tried to purge the communists, Lin Biao joined in their 6,000 kilometer long march away from Jiangxi towards Shaanxi on foot. And it was there that Lin Biao became an important military leader in the Communist Party, and he coordinated guerrilla attacks against the invading Japanese army. Once the Japanese were defeated in 1945, the Communists then turned their attention towards Chiang's KMT, who had obviously tried to wipe them out before the war. After losing some key cities in the first year or two of the war, Lin Biao proved to be an instrumental commander in the Communist counter-offensive. He was in charge of launching an offensive on Manchuria and laid siege to the crucial city of Changchun. Basically, for 5 months from September 1948, Lin starved the city into surrender. Between 120 and 300,000 people died from starvation, and get this, human flesh was being sold for US $1.20 per pound. Again, Asian history is so overlooked in terms of the magnitude of suffering. From Changchun, Lin would then go on to lead a successful offensive on Beijing, taking the airport and then the power supply. KMT General Fu Zhuoi then secretly reached out to Lin in order to negotiate a surrender of the city that saw him be personally protected. And from Beijing, Lin led the Communist Army to take control of Wuhan, and then the Communist Party went on to control mainland China in 1949. However, decades of war came at a big personal cost to Lin. Firstly, during the war with Japan, Lin had been shot and used opium and morphine to treat the pain from the wounds. If you know the story of Hermann Goering, you'd know what could possibly go wrong there. In 1949 though, Lin went to the USSR and kicked his opioid addiction. The other issue that came from being in war for 2 decades was that he'd mentally been hardwired for war. He was born in 1907 and the Long March was 1934. That meant from the years 17 to 31, extremely formative years in a young man, Lin was constantly leading people in war. Those close to him said that he was never comfortable in peacetime and needed war to function. Jonathan Femmes even suggested that Lin's behaviours exhibited that of a manic depressive. And this brings me on to a broader point about Lin Biao. His private life was really interesting. Lin had a crippling, and emphasis on the word crippling, fear of water and moving air. He couldn't bear to look at the sea, never bathed but instead used hot towels, used natural means rather than a working toilet, and Mao's doctor said that the sight of running water gave him diarrhea. So how did he survive and drink water, you might ask? Well, his wife, Yichuan, would make him steamed buns which provided his daily water intake. But this hardly got Lin his 4 litres a day, and so he suffered some pretty bad kidney stones. And so with Lin really dependent upon his wife, his children actually referred to Yichuan as being the director, and Lin being the commander. And so in 1954, 5 years after the end of the Chinese Civil War, Lin Biao was promoted to the Politburo, which was Mao's inner circle within the Communist Party. And with him, his fellow Civil War general, Marshal Peng Dehuai, was also promoted. But in 1956, Mao began his 100 Flowers campaign, where he invited criticism from those within the party. As I covered in this video, either this was a trap or Mao simply felt threatened by the criticism and actually went on to punish the critics. An example of this was Peng himself, who suggested that Mao Zedong thought be removed as the totem of the party because it created an unnecessary cult of personality. Mao didn't like this, demoted Peng, and then this saw a reshuffle within the Politburo that saw Lin promoted from 12th to 7th within the party. But it also had another effect on Lin. Seeing his fellow PLA general be demoted for criticising Mao, Lin caught on to the fact that his power and political survival would be by sticking with Mao Zedong. As Mao launched his Great Leap Forward and created large farming communes, Peng once again criticised Mao, this time for poor policies that led to the starvation of millions of Chinese. This was the last straw for Peng though, and he was ousted and his title of defence minister was then given to Lin himself. In an effort to win Mao's approval and let him know that he was on his side, Lin immediately restructured the military ranks to ensure that the party controlled the military and not the other way round. And no surprises, Lin also voiced his support for the Great Leap Forward too. But as the Great Leap ended and as 30 million Chinese died from starvation, Lin would be in line for another promotion. As I've said in a few previous episodes, Zhou Enlai, Deng Xiaoping and Liu Shaoqi were quick to reverse many of the Great Leap reforms as Mao took a backward step from policy. As you can imagine, Mao felt threatened by this because it was going against his Great Maoist Revolution and he was being made to be more of a ceremonial figure within the party. And so to counter these three, Mao needed some close allies and he turned to Lin Biao. Think about it this way. If Lin Biao could be firmly in Mao's pocket, then it didn't really matter if Mao was getting ousted in his own Politburo because he had the PLA on his side. And as Mao brought Lin Biao on side, he launched his Cultural Revolution in which he called upon university students to take action against counter-revolutionaries. If you think that sounds vague, well, you'd be right. And these university students, also known as the Red Guards, basically beat up anyone who was deemed anti-Mao. Again, as someone who was eager to side with Mao, Lin distributed the famous Red Book of Mao's sayings. Initially, he'd used this in 1964 to give to the PLA as part of the plan to bring them under the control of Mao, but this was then widely published and became the Bible for the Red Guards. With Mao's number 2, Liu Shaoqi, criticising the Red Guards, he was ousted and was replaced by Lin himself. The Cultural Revolution was long and violent, but it reached the point where the Red Guards had actually started to clash with the PLA. For example, in Qinghai, there was a confrontation that resulted in 31 deaths, and so Mao ordered the PLA to back off and let the Red Guards basically run riot. Again, as someone whose mantra was effectively "In Mao we trust," Lin agreed and ordered his PLA to not fire on any Red Guard demonstrators. An aging Mao who wasn't far off death was well pleased with this and actually ordered the constitution to be rewritten to explicitly state that Lin should be his successor. However, at some point in 1971, Mao started to get cold feet about Lin. And I think the best explanation for Mao's change of mind is this. The very thing that made Lin valuable as an ally also made him a threat. Mao had recruited Lin when he needed to. He was losing support within the party and needed someone with the X factor, the military. However, by 1971, the Cultural Revolution had seen threats like Liu Shaoqi neutralised and Deng Xiaoping exiled, meaning that he had control of the party. So to then have so much political power given to someone who already had control of the military meant that Lin Biao was a real threat to Mao's leadership. And so we're going to finish this video where we started it. Lin's family was in a resort in Beidaha, and Lin's son, Lin Liguo, also nicknamed as Tiger, seemed to understand the stakes. Now, the details are really murky, but basically Tiger angled his father towards a coup because it was better to kill Mao before Mao killed him. How much Lin Biao knew about the coup is debatable, but basically Tiger formed Operation 571, a conspiracy to board Mao's train and kill him. In September 1971, their plane left for Siberia as Tiger sought to get his father to safety. The Communist Party must have been aware that something was up because Zhou Enlai ordered an update on the whereabouts of the Trident airliner that Tiger was using to smuggle his father out. The plane left and flew northeast, but after that, we don't really know what happened to the plane. Mao decided to stay in Beijing at the Great Hall of the People because that was safer than the scheduled Zhongnanhai. The next morning, the plane was found in Mongolia with all 9 passengers dead. So, what happened? Did Mao shoot the plane down? Did it just run out of fuel? Or did Lin already try the coup and wanted to flee quickly? Well, we don't really know, and that's why I want you to leave a comment with what you think below. Following his death, National Day celebrations in Tiananmen Square were cancelled, and then in 1973, the 10th CCP Congress officially denounced him and removed his title as the successor of Mao in the Constitution. One of the most fascinating chapters of modern Chinese history remains shrouded in mystery. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit the like button to let YouTube know that Lin Biao is worth making the algorithm for. And don't forget to let me know below if you think Lin's death was a conspiracy or a coincidence. We can't wait to see you next time for our next venture into a fascinating part of history.